Hello, comrade Frankensteins. Let's watch David Lean's Dr. Zhivago, you and I, and learn about my glorious revolutions. Alright, so Dr. Zhivago is a David Lean movie. This movie, I've heard, is a romance, and I know that it's Russia, and I know that there's wolves and fur. I really am kind of dreading watching this. It is over 3.5 hours long. I like the pedigree. I don't know about the film itself. So let's trudge. David Lean's 1965 film Dr. Zhivago takes place in Russia between the years prior to World War I, the Russian Revolution of 1917, and the Russian Civil War of 1922. Not much of a description. This is one of those films that is all-encompassing. You really know about the time frame. You know about every detail that happened from this point to the end point. Really very much character-driven. And of course, our first character is Dr. Yuri Zhivago, who we meet as a young orphaned boy, and later on played by Omar Sharif. He's a doctor, he's a poet, he's a husband, a father, and an adulterer. He really seems to be pushed and pulled into different directions and never really making hard and important decisions. There might be a few, but not many. As a child, his mother dies and then his father commits suicide, and he's orphaned and sent to live with his aunt, uncle, and so, even there, he's taken and he's drafted into a different family. Even with the revolution itself and the beginnings of it, he sees what's happening and he's not a fan of the slaughter, but he's also not really a fan of them taking away individuality and just doesn't really know what to think of it and doesn't know if he's going to do anything about it. He's really not much of a participant. If anything, he's the least interesting character in this story. He's a cipher. But really, it's his watery eyes that are his number one form of communicating with the audience, and it's pretty constant. We never see him in the act of actually writing a lot of his poetry because writing is boring on film. So they made a lot of interesting choices in this film, one of which being they had a lot of different nationalities of people playing parts in this film, and none of them were Russian. Casting Omar Sharif, who is an Egyptian who looks Middle Eastern, who has an accent, was very strange. And in fact, he had to spend a lot of time in a makeup chair just to have his eyes taped back and his hair straightened or sometimes a wig. He cut about 2 to 3 inches off of his hairline to bring it back a little bit. His skin was waxed and lightened. And he had to repeat this stuff every day, and some of them at least every 3 days, so he wouldn't look so non-Russian. The melody you're going to hear over and over and over infinitum is Laura's theme. And Laura is played by Julie Christie, and she is pretty lovely in this. She's supposed to be 17. Not sure I believe that, but she is definitely a lovely woman with beautiful eyes, and that's the other thing Omar Sharif has, are beautiful eyes, and David Lean knows how to focus in on them. She is, like Zhivago, moved like a pawn by her mother, somewhat by Yuri, definitely by the war, and her other lovers, husbands, what have you. And things really work out for Laura. Strange in this one is Yuri and Laura's lives cross several times before they actually meet. The director keeps them away for quite a while. The first lines of dialogue together are like an hour and 21 minutes into the film. That's if you're counting the overture and the opening credits. And of course, to be an adulterer, you have to be married, and Tanya, played by Geraldine Chaplin, is the wife and cousin. She's wonderful. She makes sure that even during the revolution, their mansion has been taken over by 14 different families because everyone needs to be equal. She's the one with the stiff upper lip. She's the one that makes sure there's food on the table, that the kids look like they're having a good time, and that they're warm when really she shuts off the heat as soon as the doctor leaves. You feel really bad for her, and she's the one that seems to know how this all can play out. In Dr. Zhivago, the revelation is Rod Steiger, an American actor who said he just wanted to keep up with all the British actors. He plays Victor Komorowski. He's a pig, and he's also a survivor and a businessman and a rapist and a bad, bad man who knows how to get in with who's ever in charge. And because of his love for Laura, he tries to make sure that she survives the revolution, and by extension that Dr. Zhivago does as well. his is the performance to watch. One of the other main characters is Pasha, and he's played by Tom Courtenay. He's the wild card. He's Laura's boyfriend. He's one of the heads of the revolution, and Victor says this is not a man who's interested in a wife. He is always going to be gone because there's always going to be something to fight for. There's always going to be something that's more important than wife and family. He represents the ideals for Russia. He represents the people, not the individual, and he totally is not Roddy McDowall. And one of my favorite, strangest cameos is Klaus Kinski, who's playing Klaus Kinski in this movie. He comes out of nowhere, he doesn't seem to fit, but he provides a commentary on what's going on. All these people are jammed into this train to move to hopefully a safer spot out of Moscow. He's there as a prisoner, and he makes sure that you know that he's the only one on the train that is not a prisoner. And boy, you believe him. I really found this as an unromantic romance. Maybe I'm unromantic, but 3.5 hours of infidelity isn't that good for me to enjoy romantic-wise. It's everything else. It's the surrounding story. Now, Boris Pasternak's book came out in 1957. The novel had to be smuggled out of the Soviet Union. It was helped by the Soviet Union saying that we're against this because it is so against Russian communism that it became a huge sensation. 26 weeks on top of the New York Times bestsellers list. But now you can read the Russian book in Russia, because in 1988, Mikhail Gorbachev said, "Hey, we're part of Glasnost, it's cool, everyone." So when you have a book that's banned in the Soviet Union, they do not really want you to film in the Soviet Union. So they filmed in Finland, they filmed in Spain. Most of it was filmed in Spain, even some of it in Canada. And the way it was shot, oh my goodness, it's winter. It's horrible. And they had the warmest winter that Spain had ever seen. In fact, so hot that there were times it went to 90 degrees. They had to make sure that the extras weren't taking their clothes off constantly because it's noticeable. So where did all the snow come from? Well, it's fake snow, it's plastic snow, and they used marble dust. One of the most amazing scenes in this whole movie is a charge against a frozen lake, and it's all these horses, and they're charging, and they're slipping on ice, and there was no ice. They're slipping on huge sheets of cast iron that have been covered with marble dust. It sounds horrifying, it looks horrifying, but it's spectacular. Even the costuming was influential, that some of the Zhivago look, braids and fur and big hats and facial hair came back into vogue like this. Mustaches and mutton chops, and that wasn't really popular in the 50s. In the 60s, hey, we want something different, and Zhivago really hit that in. So with all this pedigree, all the people playing, everybody involved, the critics didn't like this very much. People were staying away in droves in the theater, and a big part of it was it made Russia and the Soviet Union kind of a romantic place. MGM President Robert O'Brien put another $1 million in on promotion, and it became a hit, and it won quite a few Oscars. This did spectacular business for something that failed. It ended up going from a flop to being the second highest grossing film that MGM ever made. It was right behind Gone with the Wind, but ahead of Ben-Hur. This was not the film that I thought I was going to see. I thought it was going to be all smooch face and muffs. What I got was another David Lean spectacular. I really like this film. Not just the story of people loving against the state. It's also about what people bring to society. You have this love affair. From that sprang these poems, banned in the Soviet Union because they were subversive, and yet at Zhivago's funeral everyone comes because they all were touched by the poetry. Even at some rather slow scenes, and even with main characters that I didn't find that compelling, I can see me coming back to this one. I'm giving this Dr. Zhivago 4 out of 5 amazings. Next time, the sweatiest movie ever made? You gotta run for your money treasure this year, Madre. It's Cool Hand Luke. Until next time, I'm Uncle Vanya!